Hello and welcome back to the channel. For this video, I want to go through a few channel updates, do a quick recap where we are so far, touch on a few upcoming video ideas and topics, and then the bulk of the video for today will be looking through a couple GitHub repos for some Robinhood APIs that others have created to use as a foundation for our next few videos. So, to start with, some channel updates. I'm trying to be better at uploading videos. I know the last video was about an hour long, so going forward I'm going to try to cut down the videos quite a bit to make them 30 minutes or less. So I might do a long recording session and then find good breakpoints throughout that session to do a summary and then end the video there, and then immediately start with where we left off, and then continue on for a recording session, but break it up into smaller chunks. That way it's easier for you guys to follow along and not as long videos. Another quick update, something I want to try to start doing at some point in the near future is to have a blog site that's a companion to these videos. So for each video there will be a blog post that summarizes the content of that video, provides any code snippets, provides any details on AWS services that we are creating or using, any changes to those services, basically just a written format for the videos. So hoping to get that up and running in the next few videos, and that would have a written form of the videos. So a recap now from where we are in the series. This is a Build With Me series where I'm going through step by step building a full web application. So it's going to be back-end DevOps work, front-end website work, everything we need for a fully functional web application. Each video is each piece built on top of each other, to at the end, if you follow every video, do every keystroke, every mouse press, you'll have your own fully functioning web application. The application we're building is an auto trading platform. So we're utilizing different brokerage accounts or companies, so Robinhood for now, then E-Trade in the future, and Ameritrade and any other brokerage companies. We're writing calls to their APIs to do transactions, buys, sells, account details, positions, closed positions, fundamentals, whatever it might be. We're writing those calls to retrieve that information, and then providing an automated trading to where you can put in an algorithm or use a predefined algorithm, and it will execute your buys and sells for you according to that algorithm. Hopefully, if all goes well, by the end of this, I'll have a fully functioning production business. So you all can follow along on this journey with me and build your own version of it that you all can use at your discretion. Quick disclaimer, as always, I'm not a financial advisor, so use at your own risk of anything that I put out there. But that's pretty much that. To this point, we've created a sample web client. So it's a REST endpoint we can invoke that just returns back some dummy string message. We're going to use that as a way to test our application in the future as we add more client calls into it. We're going to have that return how many test cases pass and fail, things of that nature. So aside from the web application, the Java Spring Boot app, I should say, we've also built out a code pipeline from the last video on AWS. So I went through how to create an AWS account. We set up some security for it in the previous episode, and then we've built out a full code pipeline. So now whenever we do a commit against master, it will build and deploy our application within a couple minutes. So from a couple minutes, commit to master, it's live out in AWS. We can invoke from Postman or any other tool that allows you to send REST calls. So that is a quick recap on where we are so far. Where we are going is next few videos, we're starting to actually make our Robinhood API calls. So for this video, it's going to be some research and getting foundation of what our design might look like. I'm going to go through a couple repositories, as I said, that already has some legwork. They're old repositories that no longer is being maintained, but it would be a good place to look at to get an idea of the types of calls that's available, the data being sent, data being returned, so on and so forth. So look at those today. Next video, I'm going to use some front-end magic to call Robinhood with a login and have a snapshot of the payload that it sends to Robinhood, and that is going to be what forms our payload from our Java program. So there's some key information from that first request to get your login credentials back that we will need for our Java application. So next video, I'm going to quickly go through that and how to sniff that traffic out and get that data, and which will lead to the follow-up videos where we'll start making our Robinhood API calls. So we'll be updating our sample Java Spring Boot application. The first call would be to authenticate to retrieve back a token, and that token is going to be used in further requests to Robinhood to look at account details, look at fundamentals for different ticker symbols, do buys, sells, what have you. So we're going to build out each one of these calls in separate videos. That way we have a full suite of calls at our disposal once we get to writing our algorithms and doing the auto trading portion. And at some point we'll put a front end around it. That way we don't have to use Postman every time to invoke things. It'll be I'm not sure the language yet, probably React, Vue, or Angular, since those are the major languages now for front end. We'll kind of go through those, do some pros and cons, and figure out which language we want for our front end, but they'll be pretty far down the road for now. So that is what is upcoming. So now, switching to two repos to get our foundation for our next few videos. So this repo is from Sanko. No idea who he is or she, but they have this repository out here. It's a Python coding. I mean, very top disclaimer they have is this project is dead. They no longer maintain it or update it. So it can be outdated information, but still a good place to start to get an idea or a sense of what might be out there. So we're going to refer to this for different calls. And I know it's already out of date. For instance, the fundamentals call at one point was unprotected. You just give it a request, give it the ticker, and it returns back the information about that ticker. But now, if I try to invoke this without a token, it will say it failed at some point. Here we go, 401 unauthorized. So we're no longer authorized to just call that without a security token. So another quick disclaimer, Robinhood's API is not a public API. It's all publicly available. You can call it from anything. That's how clients work, right? So you can have a website, be able to call the API, send it the request, and get a response back. So you can hit it publicly, but as far as a public API, it's not a documented API available for anybody just to use. They can make changes anytime they want at their discretion. It's their right as a company to change the input, output, security mechanisms, so on and so forth. So at any point, we can run our application today, have everything work fine. Robinhood can make a change on their end for their endpoints, and then the next day we try to run that same test and it would start to fail because they changed their interface or their expected inputs, outputs, whatever it might be. So it's totally Robinhood's discretion on how they use their endpoints and updates they make to it. So we will try to tackle those as they come to us and update our code accordingly when we find out they've made changes. But just want to let you all know about that. So yeah, so this has a lot of different calls for different things. Authentication to log in, account data, the fundamentals for ticker symbols that we looked at, so on and so forth. So this is a good place to start, but it's in Python. And our application is not Python, it is Spring Boot in Java. So the second repository is from Conrad Weiser, and it's also a dead project, no longer being maintained. And it's just a Java wrapper around Sanko's repository. So this Conrad developer just took the Python calls that Sanko had developed and put them in a Java application. So all of the Python stuff exists in this Java. And this is a little bit more useful for our purposes because our language we're using is Java. So we're going to spend a few minutes just looking at some of this design, some of these calls, how he's orchestrated everything with the calls, and we'll use this as our main foundation for our application. Ours is going to be designed quite a bit differently as far as just Java hierarchies and factory patterns and things like that, but this will still give us an idea on payloads and what calls to invoke, if it's post, get, so on and so forth. And again, the repository is dead, nobody's being maintained, so it could also have outdated calls, so on and so forth. So we're at 12 minutes, so just a couple minutes just to look through a few of his classes and what they're doing. Robinhood API is sort of his main method. It sort of is a big class that will go through and do all the different functions and use other classes as supporting classes. So log user in, log user out, account data, so on and so forth. These are all just public methods to do all those calls, all in this giant class. So that's just good to know what that class is for. This API method class is abstract class, so you cannot create a instance of it. This is going to be extended, and this is the godfather, if you will, class for the other calls. So every call to every API is going to extend this API method in some way. We'll look at a couple of those classes here in a moment. But this also has a few other support methods in it. So add the authorization header, which is your, after you log in, Robinhood will send back a special credential, and you would include that in further requests in an authorization header that Robinhood will then authenticate and say, do you have this token? You do, great, you're authorized to use this endpoint. And so he just has support methods for things like that, adding URL parameters, headers, just all kinds of different utility methods in this class. All right. His endpoint package has a few different sub-packages in it, just I guess having different groups of calls. So anything where you would get account data is an account, authorize is to log in, log out, fundamentals just get ticker information, quote, orders, so on and so forth. So we'll go through each one of these piece at a time in future videos as we make those different calls. But each one of these would have a Java class in it, a data package, and a methods package. The fundamentals class would extend API method. All right, so it just calls super with what the class is or the package. So nothing too great there. The data is just the returned response object is just the data being returned. So when Robinhood sends back, in this case, fundamentals data, it'll send back all these fields in a JSON payload, and this is the Java representation of that payload. And then methods is each of the individual client calls that you can make to Robinhood. And so for fundamentals, there's two different URIs you can call for Robinhood. And each one of these will extend the package above it. So that it extends fundamentals, which when we looked at it would then extend API method, I believe the name was. This is what sets the URL to call, adds any parameters and headers, things like that, whatever the data will look like that you're sending to Robinhood, what kind of method to use. So is it a GET request? Is it a POST request? And then what the return type is. This is that Pojo class we just looked at. So this sets up all of that data for the ticker fundamental for this class. If we look at the other one, it would be the same. It extends fundamentals again, and it sets URL, the method, the return type, so on and so forth. So, next one to look at really quickly. I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is the first one we're going to be looking at for our first call, so it'd be good to look into real quick. So this big string, he has hard-coded. This is a special string that we send as part of this payload. I'm not positive what it represents. If it represents a ID identifying him or his application, or if Robinhood sent him this string as required field, if it's unique for all people or all accounts, I should say. I'm not sure about that, but we may use this exact string for our application. But I'm also going to sniff this value from the payload in my next video and probably use that for my own application. But this is a very important value to have. So for our call, we're going to be authorizing without multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication, I think I went through a little bit with some AWS stuff, but it's basically, instead of just username and password, there's some other form or another mechanism you need to authenticate with. It's usually if you have a smartphone, like a Google application you install, and once you sync up with whatever service you need to do multi-factor authentication with, it will cycle through special numbers that you would input at that time, and those numbers expire after a few seconds. So you'd have to not only know username and password, but also that digit sequence. In this case, it does not use that. It just uses username, password, and this is that special client ID field we just looked at. And then the grant type is password. We're authenticating by using a password. It sets up the type is post. The media type is basically if it came from a HTML web form. So that's the type going in, and then returns back a token. So under the data field, there's a token class, which is just a string called access token. So a successful 200 response from Robinhood will give us a token string, and we'll use that as an authorization header in future calls. So that is the client calls, how he has it designed. The last request class to look at for this video is this request manager that he has. This has make API request, which takes in that API method or any children or grandchildren of that API method. It determines if it's a GET request or a POST request. And then this was what actually does the call to Robinhood and gets a response and translates that response back as the return type. So this is the actual invocation of the URL. Something to note, he uses OK HTTP3. It's just a public library that you can have as a dependency in your application. And that's what he uses to build the request, send the payload, and get the response back. I believe for us, we're going to use REST template, which is a Spring framework dependency or library. It's a little bit more common in that I'm used to. It's pretty well used. So we're going to use that instead of this OK HTTP library. But yeah, I believe that's it. He has a couple other supporting methods we might look at in future videos on forming your URL, forming your headers, and including headers, things of that nature. But I just want to quickly go through these two repositories and use these as a base for our application. I'll have a link for both of these in the description below. That way you all can look at it as well. But that's going to wrap up this video. It's going on 22 minutes, so try and keep it shorter, as I said. In the next video, we will try to sniff out the Robinhood login traffic to get some of these details that we need for our application. And yeah, I'm excited about that. I'll probably just keep recording for that next video, so hopefully both these videos will go up kind of back to back. But if you could, just let me know what you think of these videos. Like, subscribe, bell notification if you want to be notified. Leave comments below if you want to give me any feedback. I do read those whenever somebody posts and comments. Just let me know if you think I need to change anything, if that's a different format, questions you may have, so on and so forth. But that will wrap up today's video. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.